What's up out there? We have Affliction League starting tomorrow, and I have recently crested 540 hours in Path of Exile itself. So I thought this would be a good time to round up a bunch of things that I have learned in the game. I thought about trying to do like a top 5 things I wished I knew or something like that, but this game is so vast and complex that there's just too much to try to condense down into 5 simple ideas or topics. It would be too general, or I don't know. I just couldn't come up with any way of doing that. So what I have is several groups of things here. I will put timestamps down below, and this is not necessarily in a particular order. They are kind of clumped together in what I think makes sense. So let's dive in. Since we have a new league starting, I am going to lead off with one of the, I don't want to say this is very important, but this was very time-saving and I thought very cool. I found this out at the very beginning of the Ancestor League. I was streaming. I complained about some things that was kind of difficult getting all the microtransactions back. Like you have to go into the case, you press the K button, it brings up this, and then you got to select each individual item, you know, all the different effects you've got on everything. And then you got to do that for every character. So I was logging in, pressing K, taking everything off, log out, delete the character, whatever I was doing, and then do that for the next one. Somebody pointed out you can press the N key, which brings up this dialogue, and you can come in here and click this reclaim button and grab any microtransaction from any character in this dialogue. So you don't have to go to this one and go into each character and take all the microtransactions off. You could simply press the N key and reclaim them all from there. So I thought that was really cool, and I wanted to lead off with that in case you have a bunch of microtransactions and several characters built with those. You can recover them very easily. Following up on the microtransaction thing is something you're going to probably run into early in the game, and this was another one. I don't remember the exact scenario that this was, but I was streaming, and I needed to buy a gem. I was in Act 3 or close to Act 3 or somewhere in that thereabouts. I needed a gem, and I couldn't get it. Lily wasn't available. I didn't have my hideout, or there was some circumstance where I needed a gem, but it wasn't on the vendors that were there. Lily wasn't available, and somebody pointed out that if you go do the library mission for Siosa here, he has an option for purchasing things. If you go in here, he has basically, I don't know if it's everything Lily's got, but he's got quite a selection of gems you can buy very early on in the campaign. So if you find yourself where you need something, you're around Act 3 and Lily's not available, he is always an option to buy from. Okay, following the theme of early game and new league, I want to talk about filters for a second, item filters. Now, there are many filters you can get if you press the O button for options or click the little gear or the menu option down here and go to options. Under game, you've got this item filter. Now, the way I originally approached item filters, the first thing that I found was Filter Blade, where you actually click this folder here, and you go to the Filter Blade website, develop whatever filter you're going to get, download it, copy that file into whatever folder this opens up, and then it becomes a file on your local machine that you can open up later. What I found out later on, somebody left a comment on a video or a stream or something. They said that you can actually go to the Path of Exile website, and at the very bottom of the website itself, there are options for filters, and you can get item filters. The difference being the filters that you get from Filter Blade are files you have to copy to your local machine, which you can totally customize and make however you want. But the ones that are on Path of Exile, the Path of Exile website, show up blue like this because you can actually subscribe to them. And if you subscribe to them from the website, from the Path of Exile website, any updates to these filters will be just passed along to you. So I found an SSF filter that as long as that person keeps updating this filter, this will continually load from the website as the most current version. So the new leagues will come up. As long as NeverSync updates theirs, I've grabbed a few of the different ones that they had. And there's a wide variety of these, from regular, strict, semi-strict, strict, and there's like hardcore versions. There's Pox's Righteous Fire guides. We'll see whatever happens with Righteous Fire in this league here. But then there's this Wreckers one. There's a whole bunch of them for a variety of different content. But you can actually go and subscribe to it. That way, any modifications that are made actually show up. The one you copy to your machine is just a copy on your machine and won't be updated unless you actually go out and download the new version. So that's a very handy way to do this, as long as the filter stays up to date. Let's talk about some vendor trades real quick. With the Affliction League, they've made some changes in the way gem cutters prisms are going to affect gems. It's the quality is different. We're going to see how all that works when the league comes out. But the point is you're going to need a lot more gem cutters prisms. And one of the things that I'm going to be doing is keeping an eye out for any gem that says superior quality. So regular gems, so if it just says righteous fire on it, it has no quality on it. If you're looking at the item on the ground, if it says superior, that means it's got some form of quality, 1%, 5%, whatever it's going to have. If you trade 40% worth of quality in, you will get a gem cutter's prism. Here's 30%. If I add that fourth one, there's a gem cutter's prism. So if you trade, I'm assuming you can set up 5, 6, 7, 8 gems, however many it takes to make that quality. It's just the 40% that you need. So I'm going to be keeping an eye out for that. And those are gems that are marked superior on the ground. Same thing with flasks. If you want to get, you can trade in some flasks here and get one of these glass blowers baubles. So any of the ones that say superior, you can actually trade these off and get some of this currency to actually improve the quality of the flask. And same thing with the gem cutter's prism. It's just a free way of getting it. You just have to cart this stuff around. Some other trades to consider are 6 socketed items, not linked, but 6 socketed items will give you a stack of 7 of these jeweler's orbs, and 6 linked items will give you 20 of these orbs of fusing. Now, this is something I do. I was in Trade League, but I was not actually participating in trade. But to keep some currency coming in, those were handy to do. I'm playing SSF, so this stuff is going to be very critical for me. Another one is what they call RGB. So if you have a red socket, a blue socket, and a green socket, you can actually trade this off. Guess we'll put that in there, and you get a chromatic orb. I did not just lose that, did I? No. But if you trade that RGB item off, I'd grab daggers and stuff like that. You'll get a chromatic orb out of it. So those are pretty handy. Another thing, this one took me far too long to notice. There is a trade divination card option on Lily Roth. So if you're in your hideout, you can actually click on this and do card trades. Don't just click the sell button because you will actually just sell the cards. But if you do the trade divination, you don't have to go back to town and talk to the other guy to do that. Let's see here. When I was doing Ancestor League, there was a challenge, a league challenge, to actually complete one unique map. Well, there was a whole bunch of unique maps, but there was one remaining that I didn't have. And one thing that I didn't realize was that if you come in here to, where's the staves? There's a whole bunch of different trades you can get. I know there's a belt in here that trades 2 different unique belts to make a third one. Well, you can actually trade this Agnerod. There's a east, south, west, and a north. I don't have the north one. If you trade all 4 of those, there's a unique map. So more or less, this is to point out that there are other trades with maybe unique items or something like that that you may need to look up at some point, because for a challenge or just some item that might be really cool. There's a lot of stuff out there like this, and I just wanted to point that out because I did need that for a challenge. And then the last one I'm going to point out is the old standby vendor trade. So if I grab 4 maps, I should have grabbed this earlier, I guess. But if I grab 4 maps and trade 3 of them in, I'm going to get an underground river map. These need to be the same. And this is going to help your early mapping out. So if I have 3 pit maps, this combination of these 3 pit maps is going to yield an underground river. If I swap out this one for this one, it's still an underground river. Well, that didn't work out like I thought it was going to. Give that back and pull these 2 in. Now it's a spider forest. So the different combinations you can put together will yield different maps. Unless I grabbed the same map a second ago. There's underground river. It doesn't matter. But if you have a stack of maps and you're trying to find a particular one, you can actually trade these off. Now this is also 1 level higher. So this is tier 14. This is going to give me a tier 15 map. So if I go into my map here and I'm trying to get from, say, I have a stack of Arachnan tombs and I'm trying to get up to level 14, the pit map and shore, well, not shore exactly. It would be pen. I can't follow that line apparently. But it would give you all the ones that are tier 14. If you're trading a tier 13 map, you can swap them in and out until you get the one you need. So that's a very handy one to have, especially on League Start. This section is what I'm going to call general. There are a few things in here that really don't group together with anything else, so I just kind of threw them in a general tab and marched on. The first one is that there is an upgrade button in the Essence tab. And this, if you have an Essence tab, there's an upgrade button there. If you don't have an Essence tab, there is some kind of vendor trade you can do to actually upgrade your essences in that way. I don't know how that works. I haven't messed with it because I've had the stash tab since I've started with it, so I haven't had to mess with it. But there is an upgrade tab and it will let you upgrade these pieces. Now, it took me a very long time to figure out that in the Blight section, there's also an upgrade tab or upgrade button. I didn't really use Blight for the longest time, and you can actually upgrade your oils. You might want to pull some of the oils out so you don't upgrade the entire stack, because if you do this, it will upgrade the full stack to the next stack. If it's an even number, it will just upgrade the whole thing. So you can actually lose clear oils if you need those. So kind of be careful about that. Or maybe if you're going from opalescent to whatever this one is, it'll upgrade over it. But you have the upgrade option here. And the same thing is if you go into the Scarab tab in Fragments, there is an upgrade button here, and you can actually upgrade these as you go as well. So it took a long time for me to notice that button. When you're getting blasted by so much information in the game, it's kind of hard to, you're just trying to get by and try to figure out how things go. It's kind of hard sometimes to see some of these options like this, or the selling divination or trading divination cards to Lily. Some of this stuff is just not necessarily very obvious. Another thing that I want to point out are these incubators. Now, this one, I started getting these items. When I saw them on the ground, it said incubator. I thought they were something to do with Delve, because this has like resonators or whatever. Again, when I was very new, I didn't know what some of this stuff did or was or whatever. And I just had these things strung across in here in my inventory, in my currency stash tab. They were just sitting there. And I was on stream one day and somebody said, hey, you can just right click on that and pop it on an item right there. And what this thing does is it incubates this item. And then after you kill in this case, you kill 8,822 monsters, you're going to get an equipable item. So I can right click on that. You can actually see the little egg here where these are all incubating, and you can put this on all the items you've got. There is no real reason to hang on to these unless you just really want to stack them up for some reason, because what you're doing is just getting extra currency or items. Like this one's going to drop a talisman at some point. This one will drop a map item. So you can load these up. The one thing you cannot do, like I've got this on everything in here except for flasks. You cannot do flasks. It just doesn't have the right base type. So you can load those up on all these, and there's no reason to sit on them. Let's see. There is a death cost. This one took me a while to figure out. It didn't really show up until I was further into the mapping section, like really far into mapping, like yellow maps or something like that. Because if you don't die, you don't really notice it. And then if you do die, if you don't have very much XP built up, and then you do die, you kind of, okay, it's kind of there, but not really. There is a death cost. Now, the death cost is just like the elemental resistance changes you get. Up through level 5, you have no issues. Or I'm sorry, up through Act 5 in the campaign, you don't get any penalties to your resistances. You don't get any penalties to your XP. Once you get into Act 5 and once you kill Kitava at the end of Act 5 and start Act 6, you take a 5% penalty to your XP. So if you die, and you're going to lose 5% XP. Once you kill Kitava in Act 10, you lose 10%. That one was a real eye-opener. I kept noticing that my XP bar would be different, and I thought it was a bug. I didn't realize there was a death cost. So again, something else to be mindful of. And then the final thing for this section is I want to point out that a lot of uniques, and I don't necessarily have a specific example in here, but a lot of uniques have no level requirements. Like the Tabula Rasa, for example. This thing here, it's just item level 74. That's it. Or whatever item level that is at the time. But there are actually several of these that you can start. So if you have one character, like this one here just requires 17 intelligence. So if you have one character that's already gone through the campaign and you've collected any of this unique stuff up, and you're going to start a second character at some point, especially for me, like doing SSF, these don't require anything but a little bit of intelligence to work, or maybe there's no requirements at all. I found a nice melee one that didn't have anything on it. I don't remember which ones these are exactly, but like this one here, this Thousand Ribbons one I actually used. There's some nice amulets, and the point of this is like there's a nice amulet, I don't remember which one it is, but it gives you like 45% elemental resistance right out of the gate. So level 1 character that just got to town, or 2 or whatever you are at that point, you can actually set up a fairly decent build, and it's not great. I mean, it's not a great build, but it's better than starting out with whatever starting crap you get at the very beginning. And these they are kind of hard to work out of, because if you use this method to start a second character off, you're probably going to be over reliant on these, have a little bit of gear fear on swapping things out because you don't want to lose the decks you've got or something. So you'll have to be extra mindful for gear dropping at some point. But I'm able to get through, say, 4 or 5 acts of the campaign with just this garbage gear, or I shouldn't say garbage gear, but gear that has very little requirements to use. And you can get through a lot of the game on alt characters with that method. Let's talk about crafting for a second. Now you've got bench crafting, you've got harvest crafting, you've got this currency crafting you can do. There's a wide range of topics we could talk about with crafting, and there's just far too much to go into. But there are some things that can immediately impact your early game that I think are well worth considering. First and foremost, on a flask. If you get a flask these are probably high eye levels, so I won't have this issue. But one of the problems that I ran into, I was testing a character out the other day, and I couldn't figure out why I wasn't getting this gain 2 charges when you're hit by an enemy. Well, item level determines what affixes you can get on that item. So if the item level isn't high enough, you may get, or even the tier of the item as far as I know. So these are fairly high, so that if I run the currency on these, I can probably get this gain 2 charges. But I kept running it, and I wasn't getting that. I finally looked it up on Craft of Exile and found out that I didn't have a high enough eye level for that item to get whatever I was looking for. So the point with this here is whatever gear you're working on, if you're not getting the affix you're looking for, chances are you need to check that item and see whether it's got the right eye level for what you're trying to do. Piggybacking off of that, this is an intelligence integer. It's not integer, it's intelligence. This is an intelligence piece of armor. This one here is strength and dex. So if I try to color this one here, this is heavily weighted towards blue sockets because it's intelligence based. This one here is heavily weighted towards strength and dex. So you'll notice that, well, this one kind of worked out the way I didn't anticipate it to, but it should more than likely pull up red and green more often than any blues. So the point with this one is pay attention to like this is strength and dex. If it's solid strength, it'll be more often red. You may have to go do benchcraft for specific colors. And there's a lot of options on the bench crafting once you get all this stuff unlocked. If you come in here and do like red, there are options for at least 1 red socket, at least 1 red and green, red and blue, or 2 red and green, 2 red and blue, 2 green and 1 red. So there's a whole bunch of different options, and it's not just red, there's different green, blue. You may have to benchcraft some of the different colors on, and even then it's still like 2 and 1 or something like that. So you may have to do a best effort craft to get those colors to show up correctly. But that's based on the attributes that are on that gear. So like this one, strength and dex, if it was strength and intelligence or dex and intelligence, it would be a different combination. The colors are weighted differently. And let's see here. I should have stayed over here because I wanted to point out harvest crafting is very extensive. There is a lot of really cool things you can do here. It took me far too long to figure this out. So for instance, if you can actually change a stack of oils from one color to another. Same thing with catalysts. You can change one stack to a different type. And it goes on to fossils, catalysts, oils, splinters, divination cards. There's a whole range of stuff in here that you can change. There's also, if you do influence and go down here at the very bottom, you can actually change the influence. Like this is an elder helmet. You can actually change that influence to like conqueror or something like that, It's random, so you need a bunch of these items to actually change that. A bunch of this primal crystallized life force and one of these sacred ones. I actually did this. There was the reason this became important, and the reason I even found it out is we had those league challenges. There was one league challenge where you had to. I don't remember what the recipe was or what the recipe was for, but it was basically you had to have all items of one particular influence. Like it didn't matter which influence it was. You just had to turn that influence in, and it was. I think it was like it was a set of gear that was like all elder. I used all elder for mine, and I think you had to turn in everything. So you had to have weapon, ring, gloves, boots, like each one of these pieces of gear, but it had to be all the same influence. So I had to actually change my helmet or boots or whatever it was from whatever I had over to that elder status so I could trade it in and get whatever I needed for that. So I thought that was very cool. And in the course of looking at this stuff, I've also noticed, why is it not showing up? Guess if I go by socket, it will show up. You can actually reforge the color of a random socket, turning it white. So in this particular case here, I spent, I don't know, probably a month working on synthesis, syndicate, not synthesis, syndicate. I was trying to work through syndicate to try to get, there's a crafting option in syndicate where it will change random sockets to different colors and, potentially white sockets. I was trying to get this one socket here. Now, I know you can't necessarily target the socket, but I would need one of these red sockets to become white or blue to finish this build out. And I mean, it ended up working out that I didn't need to do that, but I spent all that time trying to do that when I could have just farmed harvest and tried this here to make that happen. So that's another option that I just didn't know existed. Let's talk about mapping real quick here. I want to start off with an alva and incursions. So if I run one more incursion, there will be an option to pull up at some point. I believe it's after I run this next incursion. It will give you the option to pull up the map and save it. So you can actually bank this and save it in your inventory. And then if you right click on it, it shows you what that map is set up for. So you can actually run a bunch of alva missions and then bank those up instead of having to run the temple over and over again. Or instead of running the temple immediately, I should say, you can actually bank those up and then run several in a row later on. Now, the next thing is about void stones. So if I get rid of myself here, I take myself out, and we look at the void stones down here, this is one that I did not understand I did not know this worked this way until I actually got my first few void stones. So if you're new and you have no idea what void stones do, just a quick brief tutorial, I don't even want to call it a tutorial, just a brief glimpse into what they do. So these maps right here, this is tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. If I socket one void stone, doesn't matter which void stone, if you socket one void zone, this now becomes tier 4. It bumps them up to a few tiers. If you socket this next one, it actually elevates everything in the map. So your red tier maps actually start showing up much sooner. So this one here is, you got to kill a rare. This one is, well, it's tier 16. This is tier 15. That's what I'm looking for. Not necessarily what you have to do to complete it, just the tier of it. So when you socket void stones, this actually starts tiering these up, and it brings because the red tier doesn't start at 16. I'm fixated on that 16. But as you socket more of these, like Race Course is a tier 9 map. Once you socket these things in, Race Course, wherever it's at, becomes tier 16. So as you socket void stones, bring myself back up here, as you socket void stones, you're actually making the maps more difficult, and you need to unsocket those when you start new characters so that you have lower tier maps for them to do. Now, the other thing I want to point out with this whole thing is your maps do not upgrade. So when you get that, if you look at the void stone, it says it upgrades your maps and it changes tiers. That's only on the new maps you receive. So if you've got a stack of maps in your inventory that's map tier 1 Bone Crypt, this is going to be map tier 1. This does not upgrade because you've put void stones in. So if you run this, it's still going to be tier 1. But if you go over to, say, tier 4 or whatever, what was that? Bone Crypt. If you go into tier 8 where it's at now, there's actually Bone Crypt maps that are tier 8. So these actually start showing up later into your, if you have the map stash tab, these will start showing up as yellow maps or red maps, depending on what they are and when they've upgraded, or what void stone they were collected on, and all that kind of stuff. So when you get that, these don't, what I'm trying to say here is when you socket those void stones, just because it says you're going to start running these at higher levels doesn't change the maps you've already got. It only is on the maps you receive after that. So it took me a little while to figure that out, so that's why I wanted to point it out. And let's see here. You can also apply currency to the void stones, which is this here, this awakened sextant. You can actually roll different things on your void stones, and there's these compasses you can get that once you've used one of these awakened sextants on the item, on the void stone, you can actually run these compasses to take that charge out and then run this later. Just gives you more options. I wasn't real clear on how all that worked. I had to do some tinkering to figure them out, but those are options there you can do. The 5-way map device, a little bit of a spoiler here. I thought this came from working with void stones, so when I couldn't get all 4 of the void stones, I kind of wrote this off as not being possible. Then I looked it up, and I found this out at the very end of the league. You actually get this from running Legion missions. What you do, fragments, is you run Legion missions and you will collect these splinters of the various factions. Once you've gotten 4 of these things into emblems, you run 4 of those emblems, and if you survive that and complete that, you will get that 5-socket item. So one of the things I'm going to prioritize early on in this league coming up is getting this 5-socket map device unlocked. And let's see, what else do we have? The other thing I want to point out is if you go in, if you have a map, or if you have the stash tab for Blight, you will see these maps collecting here. And if you have the one for Delirium, they will collect these maps here. These are options. These are the blighted maps, are not just a regular map where you'll find Blight on it. This is a map that is made specifically for Blight. So instead of just having a small minor encounter, this is going to be a massive Blight encounter. And this is another one, it took me a long time to actually, oh, what's this do, and try it out. But you run this in the map device, and it'll give you a massive, I don't know, 10 or 15 minute long Blight event that you have to survive. And by 10 or 15 minutes by the time you've survived it all and then loot it all, because there's a ton of loot on this. And the same thing goes for Delirium. These maps are specific Delirium maps that are Delirium from the start to the finish, so you don't have to worry about it. And then there's this currency item here that you can actually right click and select a map, and it will make that map blighted. Now you would collect these simulacrum splinters and then run a simulacrum later on. So a lot of these map mechanics have a lot more depth than what you see on just running the normal mapping process and maybe encounter a little bit of Delirium or a little bit of Blight or something like that. There's a lot more mechanics to them than what you initially see. One thing I didn't catch on to at first is that strong boxes can actually be modified by currency. There's even an engineer's orb to improve the quality of the strong box. So if there's one that you have, like maybe a cartographer's one or something like that, that you want to get some maps out of or something, or there's some, I think there's some for scarabs and stuff like that, you can actually juice those up a little bit and get better rewards out of them. And I noticed that the strong boxes were coming in different colors, different varieties. Like you had some that were unique, some that were rare, some that were magic, and some that were normal, but I didn't realize you could actually affect those by currency. So as you're going through the map, you can do that. It's not necessarily something you want to do a lot because, well, for one, I don't really have a lot of these engineer's orbs, and for two, the strong boxes aren't really that great of a source of anything, but you can juice up some of them for maps or scarabs or something like that. Far into the mapping process, it might be more worthwhile, but it's an option that you can do. You can also run these orbs of alchemy on them just to bring the normal ones up. So I probably wouldn't be a bad idea to even carry some of these at some point. I don't know. Again, it's not necessarily a great strategy because strong boxes aren't that great, but it's a strategy nonetheless, and one you can put through mapping. So figured I would mention it. Okay, for this last section is a couple of things about skill gems. Now, these were very hard-fought lessons. It took me a while to understand, and they once I understood them and everything lined up, boom, I'm on board with it. First one is how And this is a specific example for Righteous Fire and Swift Affliction, but this applies in other cases because I have ran into this with other builds. You're following a build guide, you go by the gem, and you highlight over it, and it has an X in Righteous Fire, so it does not work with Righteous Fire, and you don't understand why. The guide says it, and it should work, but it doesn't work. The reason that that is the case is that you need another gem to be socketed that offers that tag. So when I first started playing this, I thought that Swift Affliction was only had this list. I thought it had that list hard coded into it, and that it would only work with those. But it's more of a tagging system. So if you put in this life tap, which does have duration, it now allows Righteous Fire to be used with Swift Affliction to be used with Righteous Fire. Now, the kicker to this, and maybe it's because it's a Vol gem, but Vol Righteous Fire has the duration tag, yet still doesn't work with this. If you just look at a regular Righteous Fire gem, it does not have Vol or duration in it. So I don't know why you can't just use Swift Affliction with it. Don't ask me that. But what I do know is that you have to socket one gem that offers the tag for the other gem to work. And I have seen this with other builds, and I've kind of gotten mad about some of these builds because I'll go grab a bunch of gems and it doesn't say it works with it, so I end up jettisoning the one that doesn't work. Well, that was before I found out how this tagging system works. So I know this is a Righteous Fire example, but that works in other builds in other places. And the other thing I want to point out is how apply additional curse, and what that means and how it works. This was another very big learning curve. I found that ring before I found elemental weakness. So I didn't come to these 2 points at the same time. I found the ring one week and I tried it and it said you can apply additional curse. So I thought, okay, I'll just apply flammability twice. That's not how this works. This is 2 different curses. And additional means what it means, but it could mean a couple of different things. You know what I mean? Like when I first got to this, I thought it meant you can apply an additional flammability. So now you've double flammability'd somebody, but that's not what that means. It means flammability and like elemental weakness. So I have both of these on here. And what I found was I tried this ring once, 1 week, and it didn't work. And then I redid my build a little bit, found out I was missing elemental weakness, put that on, and then it was toggling between flammability and elemental weakness. Then somebody tied the 2 together and said you have to have either an anoint on your amulet or maybe a piece of gear or like this ring, which allows you to apply an additional curse, and that lets you do both flammability and elemental weakness. Now again, this is in the context of Righteous Fire, but that applies to any other build that uses dual curses or whatever like that. You have to have an item that will allow it to be done. Otherwise, you're flipping the switch between one and the other. So I thought those were really good points to throw out there, and they were hard-fought lessons, and hopefully they will help somebody. And that will wrap up this collection of things that I have learned. We'll be back with another one, I'm sure, in another 500 hours. But those were all very hard-fought lessons in some cases, and in other cases, they were just things that I totally blindingly ignored the entire time, especially like Lily trading divination cards. The option's right at the top, or the upgrade button on some of those tabs. Like, those are there, but I just didn't always see everything because there's just so much coming in at once and you're in a hurry to go do the next thing or whatever. So all of these things have been a big part of the learning curve that I've had up to this point, and hopefully maybe you've picked something up along the way. If I've got anything wrong, it will be corrected down in the comment section below. I am very sure of that, and hopefully there's been something useful. Anyway, that will do it for this video. We will catch you on the next one. Take care.